Got it.
Okay. It seems to be online now.
Yep. Yes, we are there. Good. So I'm telling to 1, 2, 3, and then I'm starting. So 1, 2, 3. Good evening, everybody. We are again here with our episode 23 of Don't Give Up Ukraine. And we wanted to talk this evening about well, how this war affects soldiers in the trenches, how this war affects the daily life of Ukrainians. And we're very fortunate to have here as our guest Tymo, who I already know for a long time, so we know each other. So Taras, so very welcome here. And basically we're doing this as we always do. So Taras is going to introduce himself a bit, and then he's telling something about this last week in Ukraine, in Lviv, for Taras himself. And then we are starting talking about our subject. And I have to mention that Taras did a very magnificent job, I think, by commenting on this, on the war, almost on a daily basis in the first 100 days. You can look it up at YouTube again. And he just mentioned he wanted to start it again. So I think it was very important to have your face on the screen, Taras. So someone
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for being here. And well, introduce yourself a bit.
Well, I live in Lviv, Ukraine. I teach in the Ukrainian Catholic University. I'm professor of theology. And I studied here in Ukraine for my undergraduate, and then in Belgium in Catholic University of Leuven for my master's in theology, and in the United States in the University of Notre Dame. So I accumulated a large network of contacts from my student years, then from my different professional contacts over those years. And all these people, many of them started to ask me when the war erupted, how am I doing? How is my family doing? What do I think about the situation? And it was impossible to answer all those requests privately. So I decided I will just record short videos. I call them live video updates from Ukraine, which were daily and in the first 2 weeks or so, and then every second day or every third day, depending on the situation, on the events. And those became rather popular, hundreds of views, sometimes thousands of views per video. And I tried to bring kind of human face to this war, because what you are getting from the coverage in the media is usually like helicopter view of the events or a satellite view, like the big events on the front lines, or some like huge tragedies like Bucha and all that. Obviously that gets covered by, but I know from my experience of following other wars, for example in Syria, that the picture you get from mainstream news is maybe accurate, maybe distorted, but it's always very general. And when you subscribe to a Twitter account of someone who actually reports from the ground, is completely different. You get the feeling of what's going on, you get very concrete facts, very concrete insiders' comments. And so that's what I was trying to provide at my modest scale to my viewers on my YouTube channel over these 3 months. And as Ruth just mentioned, I interrupted this project for 3 weeks or so recently, because in the summer we all needed a little bit of rest and break and change of scenery. But I'm hoping to continue this because I think it has a vivid feedback from people who were watching. And also I was honestly, it also had a pragmatic purpose of raising some money for the army. I cooperate with one volunteer initiative here in Lviv, Help to the Front, which is just a civic network of people who raise money and then buy equipment, vehicles, medical supplies for the army and send those to the people, to the soldiers in the front lines. So that was also very helpful because I think I have raised a substantial amount of money through those videos. Many people volunteer to help, not only financially, but in many other ways, and I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, I think it was very important what you did and what you do, and it's also this almost splitting yourself. So on the one day you are a professor in theology, and you are working, as I remember, on your dissertation on the patristic period and so on, and almost overnight you are commenting a war. So
yeah. It's a stretch. Sometimes I'm asking myself, like, what are you doing? You're not a military reporter or anything. Like, why are you even in that business, so to speak? But that's the reality we have to face. And I think if I found my little small niche I'm filling in and it's useful, and from the feedbacks I'm getting from people, it seems to be useful for other people. So why not do that?
yeah, of course. So, and if it's a question we ask our guest every week, so we get a kind of chronicle also of the war, is how was your week in personally, or Lviv or Ukraine, when it comes to the war?
Yes, well, I was on holidays this week, to be honest, like the previous week, and we just returned to Lviv yesterday evening. So it's a paradox because on the one hand, yes, we had very good rest into the wild, in the nature with children. We tried to empty our head from all the stress and all that. So just to step back and to look at the life maybe at a larger scale. But on the other hand, it's impossible to abstract yourself from what's going on. And obviously we were following news just as we do them here in the city. It's a paradoxical feeling because you are in a peaceful environment and then you open your Facebook or you open those Telegram channels and you see what's going on. And especially with the speed of reporting that is happening with all those social media today, it's like 3 minutes ago, a rocket hit Kharkiv, and you are already reading this in your telephone, and sometimes see like video footage of what happened, and people in real time chat that we are expecting another rockets to come in because we know that it was fired from Belgorod and it's on the way to Kharkiv or something like that. And it really gives you this surreal feeling of human tragedy that you observe almost like a computer game.
Yeah.
Another thing, like this morning, for example, I woke up and I opened my Facebook and I paged it for a few minutes, and I came across like 3 or 4 posts that reported someone's death at the front lines. So luckily, these were not people I knew closely, or I didn't know them at all. These were like friends of my friends, but still it's painful enough. So you are opening a social network which was invented to be like sharing photographs from parties and kittens and birthdays, and what you are reading there is like reports of casualties and human tragedies again.
That's really tough. Eh? So I remember from this week, this was this little child, what was Lisa,
Yes.
4 years old, in the park, and then the rocket came down and the life was extinguished. So she died. She had Down syndrome, make me very much think about my sister. I once had a sister with the Down syndrome, but it gives you so much feelings of, on one hand, helplessness in the sense of how to stop this madness, and on the other hand, this feeling you immensely angry about what's happening. So, and this happened then by the day. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Generally, this feeling of anger is something that is, I think, worth reflecting, because we are all we are all children of peaceful times, and like we have known each other for more than 10 years now. I cannot believe that, but and you remember the times you were coming to Lviv and we were having like coffee or dinners together and spoke, and you are humanists, I am a humanist, I'm a theologian, so we would never think we will live through a period when we actually rejoice at the death of other people. And what I mean rejoice is obviously not, it's not the right word, but when the war started and we saw these columns of tanks and these thousands of Russian troops marching into the country and with very clear intent to kill people, to commit genocide, honestly speaking. And when they were stopped by the army and when their tanks were burned and people, the soldiers were killed and everything, I felt like justified anger and kind of justified joy. Maybe joy is not the right word, but satisfaction probably. Not at the fact that those people were killed, but at the fact that those people were stopped and their evil intentions were not allowed to happen. And yes, the death is the price to pay for that, unfortunately. And even having gone through this 3 months or first 3 months, intensive months of the war, I still return to the same feeling like every morning, that on the one hand, I hate to see people dying, I mean enemies like Russians, Russian soldiers. I hate to feel satisfaction because of that. On the other hand, all my rationality and my conscience say is this is the right thing to happen during the war. It's what the war is. We have to protect ourselves, and it's like black and white. If we don't put an obstacle on their way in the form of weapons and military power, we will be destroyed as a country, as a people. And unfortunately, we have to go through this black and white phase in our lives. Maybe not unfortunately, maybe this is something that is edifying for us as the nation and as people. I think we were too spoiled with a long peace and prosperity in Europe, and sometimes maybe we forgot this kind of brutal truth of life, that sometimes violence is the only issue. You know, sometimes you see in pop culture this slogans, violence is not the solution, or something like that. Well, now we are in the situation where violence is the only solution, unfortunately.
And that is indeed what you say, a kind of, well, we are not used to think about this way. We were not used to think about this way, about violence, and it still has something, but it's difficult to reconcile yourself with that it is happening.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes me very think of that. And even if you think about, of course, thinking about the future is in a sense a bit like, well, what happens, happens. But when you think back in this 20th century and you see what it has brought in terms of human rights and all these kind of things, I think we should never forget that it started with a rage about happened in the concentration camps.
Mm-hmm.
Was a kind of an umsetzung, a transformation of this rage in something constructive. Right? So what you can say, okay, this shouldn't happen again. What obviously is not a guarantee that it won't happen again. But it was really, I still think, a step forward. And that's why what I think of myself, that I think of myself, well, I have to keep thinking about that. And so the violence is unavoidable. The world is black and white, if we like it or not. And we are the white and they are the black, so to say. And if we, that's like what you are Ukrainian said, that's maybe still they are the orcs, and this is Mordor, you know. So this is like this black and white, good and bad, and so on. And I'm pretty sure about this. This is really about good and bad.
Yeah.
There is no shade about that. So, and it's also this very, let's say, disturbing things in the war, that there is something evil, even if you don't want to call it that way. You like to think about it. I know from my fellow countrymen, didn't we provoke the war? Didn't we didn't we just, didn't we so? But it's really nonsense. This really evil acting out. And
absolutely, absolutely.
And probably this only can be stopped this way. Only the price is so immensely high, not only for them,
things like this kind of war cannot be provoked. I understand that politically speaking, there can be provoked conflicts, tensions, but those are different in nature. Those are like, small skirmishes between maybe two armies on the border, or some kind of diplomatic tension. But if you are shelling cities with ballistic rockets and thousands of people, civilians die, like in Mariupol or now in Kharkiv or other places, even if it was provoked, even the provocation remains like 1% of the reality. All the rest is piled up on it, has absolutely no excuse. There is no way to represent it as provoked.
Yep. And that's actually true. And then this also, then also the question comes up, but maybe we can talk about this a bit later if we still have time, is what this unprovoked war and this violence on an unprecedented scale. So in a sense, so what it is. I talked with my friend Michiel Driebergen, and he's a journalist. You probably remember him, and he said,
yes.
I'm talking with war correspondents. So and they are in the front, and they told him, well, we haven't seen this in Syria, and we haven't seen this in Chechnya, and so on. And this is really, really worse than that. So, and then the question, of course, comes up: what obligation does this provoke for us, not in this war, living in the Netherlands, living in Belgium, living in the United States, and so on, to support Ukrainians? But let's leave this question out. So, and try to get a bit to your own, let's say, reporting on the war. Let's these first 100 days, but also where you're still part of it. So it's a bit difficult question, I think. But wars are fought by soldiers, men and women, Ukrainians who are at the front and experience the war, sometimes desperate, sometimes heroic, sometimes dying, sometimes wounded, and so on. Do you have any idea of what how do you say that? How is their mood? What is the feeling? What is happening? What's your impression about life at the front? That's basically the best question.
Yeah, well, it's somewhat ironic that someone like me has to speak about that. I've never been at the front lines and I'm not there now. But if I can be the voice of them, I think people, I know personally a number of people who were or still are at the front lines, and I admire all of them because some of them are professional soldiers, but 90% are not. They are like IT people, little businessmen, teachers, professors, people of all walks of life, and they abandoned everything and went to the war, to the front lines in the first days of the war without any questioning. Most of them were prepared physically, maybe had some basic military training, and some of them even didn't have that. It was completely kind of spiritual move, and then they learned on the go how to do various things on the front lines. And yes, I admire them, and I think these people have exceptional feeling of solidarity with and responsibility for their own country. Um, they are brave, but being brave doesn't mean they are like, it's not bravada, right? It's just responsibility and maybe feeling of being ready for a sacrifice, accepting the sacrifice you are making.
Yeah.
It's for many people it's very tough, and it's getting tougher and tougher, of course, because some of them are there for 5 months. It's tough on their families, on their wives, who are obviously in a constant stress for 5 months now, expecting a call, sometimes not getting a call from the husband for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and having no clue what to think if anything happened, or he is just in the area where the use of mobile phones is not allowed, because as we know, mobile phones are easily identified and can be used for artillery, enemy's artillery correction. So yes, it's extremely stressful for many people. People still are keeping their morale high. Yeah, there are probably people who are desperate, scared to death, but most of people, as I'm seeing from personal contacts and from the social media, are keeping their spirit high and pressing forward, no matter what it costs them.
Mm-hmm. So, and they are not all volunteers, of course. So,
Most of them are. Most of them are.
uh-huh.
Yes. Some people were enlisted to the army like by law, but I think most of people are, yeah. Most of people I know and I'm following on the social media, or I speak in the real life, went there as volunteers.
So and that's something. So it means that you're basically prepared to give your life. What's an immense sacrifice which you are making for your
Yes.
your country, for your nation.
Absolutely, absolutely, and especially given the fact that on everyday basis we are receiving reports of people we knew who actually died in the war. So it's psychologically it's very different. If you know it theoretically, you know that yes, of course, people get killed in the war, but whole different experiences if you again open your telephone and you see it in real time that your list of friends is becoming smaller and smaller because those people have already relocated to the other world.
Yes, yes. No, not all of them are fighting, of course, I think. So war now at the front.
Well, nowadays, you know, the idea of the concept of fighting has changed a lot too, because all people I communicated with say this war is so different even from what happened back in 2014, 15, because that war was mostly like fire weapons war, like machine guns, and you know, you really were in action. And nowadays, only a very small percentage of special forces go through like real action appointments in the fighting in the front. Most of people hold their position under very heavy artillery fire, sometimes bombardments from the warcrafts, and this is by unanimous witness of all people I have been speaking to. This is the most difficult part of the war, because if you are engaged in combat situation, you think you are in control, or you really are in control, but you are kind of interacting with the situation. If you are just under the artillery shelling, rocket shelling, warcraft bombardments, nothing depends on you. You have just to stand firm, to hold your ground, and hope and pray that they miss you. That you will not be the target of a next projectile or anything.
Yeah, difficult to imagine to be there.
Yeah, and we don't know yet what will be the psychological outcome of this, because the post-traumatic stress disorder, as we knew it, was very different, because it was again from these combat situations. But we don't know what happens to human psyche after being, say, for 2 months in the situation where in any moment you can be killed by artillery. It's unpredictable. Sometimes you don't even hear the sound.
Yeah. And that's a true thing. So it's not only the you can get wounded or get killed, but there will be a time when you get home again. So like the deer hunter, you know. So you get home, finally apply in society. Sometimes having to get to terms with yourself, because you know what happened there, you know what you did, what you didn't do. So that also means that we have a huge obligation to these volunteers, these friends of yours who are there, to help them when they come back. How difficult that will be, also for their families, I suppose.
Absolutely, yes, yes. But as you said in the beginning, now we are in the stage where we have to live like inch by inch, day by day, or hour by hour, and in the due time, in the due course, we will address also this issue. I hope we will be as united in helping soldiers who returned as now we are in helping those who are in the front lines.
Yeah. So just to ask this question, how do you see now this situation, let's say from your commanding point of view? So you command every day, impression every day of almost every day of the war, and you say, well, this is going up there, and you have to watch out for these kind of stories, because these are, like, say, make-up stories, or part of the psychological warfare, or fake news, or whatever. How do you see the situation today, this moment?
I think yeah, I'm really having difficulty to say something meaningful, because it's a kind of commonplace that the situation isn't like a stalemate today, because the front lines are not moving fast, are not moving in any direction. The Russians have used most of their forces by now, and we know it for fact that in terms of military, in manpower, I think they have already climbed the plateau, so to speak. They have reached the numbers in their army that they cannot increase it anymore unless they proclaim the general mobilization, because the potential of mobilization in Russia is up to 18 million people. So if they issue a law that all the males, say 18 to 50, have to go to army, they could reach the number of 18 million persons army, which of course will not happen because it's impossible logistically to provide weapons and supplies and everything for the army. But still, they can increase a lot of manpower, but they don't have enough sophisticated modern weaponry, and this war is the decisive element of this war is technology, as we see. So with more weapons coming into Ukraine, like those HIMARSs and other types of modern weapons, I think we are reaching the real balance of power, Ukraine and Russia. The question is what happens when we reach it, because looking back historically, the first weeks of the war was like a miracle that we could stop Russia. Then the further miracle was that we pushed them away from northern Ukraine, from Kyiv and Chernihiv, and then the front stabilized. And another miracle was that they did not succeed in their advancement in Donbass as they hoped. They did succeed, but in a very small proportion to what they were hoping for. And now it seems like we can actually break the situation to our advantage and maybe to push them away from Kherson region in the South Ukraine, and maybe destroy this Crimean bridge, or do other important symbolical and tactical moves. But again, even if that happens, we are facing a long winter. It's like in the Game of the Thrones. The winter is going to be long and cold. And by winter, I mean just all this time from, say, end of the summer and all the way into the next year, into the spring. Probably be a very long positional war, and us just waiting for Russia to collapse economically, or maybe for some internal processes to happen in Russia. But these are very speculative things. We don't know if it's going to happen or not. And I think the situation today is very hopeful for the Ukrainian side in terms of us holding the front lines and hitting their targets, hitting the targets on Russian territory, the military warehouses and their headquarters, military headquarters, which is rather big success for Ukrainian army today.
Yes, I would say so. I agree with that. And also this thing is when this when you have to think about the winter, so it also means a very difficult situation for soldiers in at the front who are fighting and so on. So this is also going to be a very difficult way to live with and to deal with, I think, for them. So this is yeah. So, but that's a bit more my impression too. That, well, the tragedy of a stalemate is often that it's a stalemate, but that doesn't mean that there is no fighting going on. There's no shelling and so on. A stalemate is like what do you say, is a static equilibrium. So what
equilibrium of power, yeah. Exactly. But rather bloody equilibrium, because as we are seeing that the hits by artillery, by rockets from both sides take a lot of lives in the military, I mean. But unfortunately, Russians, when they cannot do anything in the front lines, they turn to hitting civilian targets, and that's why we are seeing those, girls and boys in Kharkiv or in other places, like even in Vinnytsia, which was rather west located city, killed, because they are targeting some objects in the cities that are filled with people, and obviously there is huge collateral damage.
So you could say this was like maybe it's not it's a tragedy of your success, the success in Kiev and Kharkiv, where the Russian scenario didn't play out, and they had to leave with very high casualties, but also with proof of crimes against humanity, war crimes, genocide,
Yeah.
and so. And then it seemed more or less that they let go all the evil what still had some restraint in it, so to say. And then and even also, I think, a bit supported by Western hesitations of what to do now after Ukrainians succeeded in pushing back Russians from Kiev and from Kharkiv. And so then this strategy of scorched ground started to play out. So destroy cities before you get in, and this is of course, yeah, that's well, that's very difficult to deal with, in the sense that it's so inhuman. Let me say that this. I say it's a bit stupid word maybe, but it is. It is.
Yes,
so,
yes, well, it is. Yeah.
Humanizing. So if you look at from, so this is a bit what happens at the front and the military and so on, and how does this war, this violent playing out, and so hit Ukrainian society, civil society, people at home, and so on. So you can read a lot about it, but I think it changed also Ukrainian society, I think, but it also give it a lot of things to deal with, I think, in your daily lives as citizens. So how do you cope with the war?
Well, what we're feeling in like these days is that there will be no quick solutions, and the situation is going to be at the long term very complex, very complicated. I just spent some times with people who are refugees in Western Europe, people from Kharkiv, and just our friends, but we know a number of families who fled to various European countries, from Finland to Greece, and they're all confused. They don't know what to do, because when they were fleeing, it was like spontaneous decision, which was certainly right. They ran for their lives, and they were accepted by people, sometimes with more help, sometimes with less help, but usually quite well. And they didn't think about any larger picture and long-term plan. But now, after 4 months of war, it's becoming clear that they have to decide what to do. They cannot stay any longer in a kind of limbo, just living in a friend's apartment because he's nice, yes, but 4 months is a long time, and it's not gonna end sooner than, I don't know, in another 4 months at least. So they start to think, like, should they find a job there? Should they somehow adapt to the culture, to the situation, learn the language, or should they be moving back to their country and settle somewhere in the Western Ukraine? And if so, what will they do? What is the job prospect for them, and all that? So it's extremely complicated for people who became refugees, especially in the countries that do not provide any systemic help. Mm-hmm. Like in Greece, the state doesn't help you in any way. So it's only like private initiatives of some people who wanted to receive the refugees. In Ukraine, I think people who moved westward from the east, from the south, they have already found some niche here locally, because obviously in your own country it's always easier to do, more connections, more flexibility, the language, the culture. So I'm feeling that people are well received. People from the east are well received here in the West. people still want to help the army. I'm seeing regular fundraisers on Facebook or other social media, say by families of soldiers. If a regiment of soldier, a unit needs something quite expensive, like a new car, like old used car, but still usable, it will cost like 5,000 euros. So it's hard to finance it from one pocket. So people would fundraise, and people are rather responsive to it. Obviously, people have less and less money, and people from the West help ever less, because everyone is kind of losing the focus on we are not the only news-making country in the world. Of course, people's attention shift, but it's still going on. This solidarity maybe somehow diminished in scope, but it's still there, and I think, yeah, people are certainly determined to win this war, because if we learned anything in the first few months of the war, is that it's not a political war, it's an existential war. So if we lose it, we lose our nation, we lose our identity, many of us lose our homes and our lives. So it doesn't give you much choice for deliberation, what to do, to fight or not to fight. Yep. It's not about some, political concessions or something like that.
Yep. And that's this supporting of the war. That's really well the photo on my background. So I found it by coincidence today. A little float raising money for soldiers. And that's such. It's lovely. It's solidarity. It's so deep that even if you are a child, you think, okay, I'm gonna stand somewhere in the street and blow on the flute and gain money. And it makes me think about some historical wars where this same happened. So I was thinking about the American War of Independence, and there was a very good book I read. It's called "People Numerous and Armed." So
numerous and
armed with weapons. And it was this. So these Americans then were fighting the colonial power, the English, so to say. And technically, and in terms of power, they didn't have a chance, of course, but they won. And they won because they were supported in the homes of everyone who were living there, and so in America. Yeah. And so this, and you can see it the same at the French Revolution, if you want to see some parallels, so to say. This revolutionary wars in the beginning. This was like I studied it for some time. So, and this was also the mobilization of the society at large to protect the revolution. And I know very well the Declaration of Carnot is that yes, the women are encouraging the soldiers in the street, and the kids are making fuses in the factories, and then at Genappe, that's very near where I'm living now in the north of France. They defeated the European coalition, so to say. Mm-hmm. This is a very interesting parallels in the sense what a society who has decided, well, we can't be defeated, can bear, but also can do. So, and you see that in these small things. And like this little girl who was doing this, and what you are doing, of course, what you are doing by making your broadcasts and so your videos. And so everybody is looking for a way to how to get involved in the war, how to buy a car for the front, all these kinds of things. That's what I find so special about looking at Ukraine today, that everybody, as I can see it, so you are there, I'm not.
You are right. You're right. You're absolutely right. Yes, there is a huge mobilization of people, and this can happen only if this is really people's war. It is people's war, because we all know that the alternative to winning this war is so terrible, and it's such a high price unimaginably high that we cannot afford. We cannot afford to let it happen.
Actually, that is what Ukraine makes Ukraine so different from Russia. And so Russia is not a people at war, so to say. So,
No, and yes and no. Unfortunately, it's a huge tragedy of Russia that the propaganda has brainwashed people to such an extent that many Russians actually do believe this absolutely absurd notion that if Russia would not attack Ukraine on February 24. Ukraine was about to attack Russia on March 1st or so. NATO, well, they wouldn't say Ukraine, they would say NATO from Ukrainian soil would attack Russia. And this is like, has absolutely no ground in reality, but unfortunately this is what they believe. And I made an experiment, an interesting one in the first month of the war. There is this website, kind of web service called Chat Rouletka. Chat roulette. So it's like live chat with real people who sit at the other, at the other end of your internet connection based on IP addresses. So I connected with some Russian people just to randomly ask 10 guys, 20 guys on this chat roulette if they really believe the war is justified, on what they think about that. And to my huge disappointment, they actually are. I don't believe you can orchestrate it. So these are real people, and they are like from Vladivostok, from Moscow, from Petersburg, from small towns all over Russia. Obviously, I didn't do any, sociological survey, representative sociological survey, but I spoke to really 20 to 30 people, and only 2 or 3 of them said, yeah, we are sorry for what's going on. It's sad. But most of them just quoted various TV propaganda cliches, either about Ukraine preparing to invade Russia, or about laboratories, CIA laboratories developing deadly viruses in Ukraine, and they had to put the stop to it, or some other completely rubbish propaganda ideas. But unfortunately, they do believe in it, and they do support war, but it's more like a theoretical support. It's not nothing like really raising money for the army or volunteering to go to fight. No, not at all.
No, in that sense, you're right. So it's more theoretical. It's there, the support. Although I often think, if you really look in the brains, if you really believe what you're saying, I'm not sure about that. And so and because if I look at our 23 episodes of Don't Give Up Ukraine, this is basically one of the basic themes: how to understand that this happened in Russia. So because it is so important, if you try to think about the end of the war. So you can think about the end of the war as a military defeat, so to say, or some kind of negotiation because you simply don't want to give any more volunteers at the front, so to say. Let's for the moment keep it like this. But then still is in the north of Ukraine, so in Russia, some immensely big nation with, so to say, with this mindset. What's so pervaded that you can say, well, we are allowed to do this. So, and this is one of, I think, the biggest questions for the future, because this is not only about Ukraine, but it is also about Europe. It is about the world. And so, in the sense that how to understand this Russian aggression of a country that with this has history in the 20th century, so of even as an empire, if you may say so. I don't know. Have you any thoughts about that? So, well, I simply don't think about that. This is a kind of geopolitical play out of Putin, in the sense of, well, we need more land, or we need more this, or we need more that.
No, it's unfortunately it has much deeper roots. We are thinking about that a lot, and I watch various people who comment on that from various countries and various sites. And the more I reflect on it, the more I think that unfortunately, the only solution to this problem is a military solution. I think just as well as Nazi Germany or German nation in the mid 20th century who needed a harsh military defeat and humiliation to come to senses. The same is at play here. I would love to have a different diagnosis. I would love to say that, oh yeah, there are enough sensible people in Russia who will initiate a movement like anti-Vietnam War in the US or something, and to pull the troops out of Vietnam, stop the war. Well, there are no critical mass of people to begin with. Secondly, the situation in Putinist Russia is extremely controlled. It's not like democratic United States that you could have manifestations and all that. People who dare to even call this a war can be put to prison for 6 years. And that's serious. It's not a joke. There are people who already are taken to court for calling the war, not a special operation, and let alone to say that stop the war or demoralizing troops by sending some pacifistic propaganda, or that's impossible in Russia. And the other solution that sometimes people give is that when Putin dies or is displaced, everything will turn back to normal. But unfortunately, no, I don't believe that. And history doesn't give you any grounds to believe this, because what we are witnessing today is not like Putin's whim. It's a organic continuation of Russia's imperialistic, chauvinistic policies that have been around for centuries. It's not even a Soviet phenomenon. It's a Russian imperialistic phenomenon that we saw in 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, in various forms. And I think, honestly, that Russia is simply too big to remain a normal country. It might sound terrible, but without territorial disintegration, this country will remain a threat for Europe and for all the neighbors as long as it exists. It has just too huge resources. It's like oligarchs. If you want to have a sound economic system, you cannot have someone who accumulates like 20% of GDP in his own hands and then owns like all the leading TV stations and half of the parliament. And that's what Russia is. It owns like half of the oil market, half of gas market in Europe, and then huge resources and nuclear weapons and huge territory and all that. So having that and not going crazy with like feeling of uncontrolled power is impossible. And we are seeing it time after time in many centuries. So
there is this. So for me, if I think about this, I'm thinking about the same question as you are. So in a sense, why is this happening? So this is a base. I want to know, to speak with Hannah Arendt. So I have to understand. So there are several things to think about, but one of the things why I'm thinking about is the Gulag as the center of the Russian society, including the terror, but also including the inability, not being able after 1989 especially, to come to terms with this part of your history. So, and that's what also makes it different from Germany. So also why Germany was defeated and Russia was not defeated, was one of the victorious countries after World War II. But this not going to turn with the Gulag, what is basically a phenomenon, if you may say so, of terror, where no, maybe not the whole society, but a lot of the society, Russian society, was involved with. So if you have 20 million people who are actually perished by that, so then there are
every family is affected. Yeah,
exactly. So this is something I think what's really I find it mind blowing. Right? So it's not that not mourning happened in Russia, and there were actually very good books written and works of art, but it never became political. So it never became like, okay, someone has to pay the price for these crimes. So, and even in 2017, there is this Levada Center in Russia, and they made this popularity polls, the biggest leader in history. So, and guess who was number one? Stalin. And guess who was number two in 2017? Putin. And this tells it all, more or less. So this is very, and it makes it even more complicated to us, because then if you are right by saying, well, only a kind of disintegrated Russia is actually no threat for us in the future, because of, then this has also the tendency to become an all-out war. So because you really have to defeat Russia. So you,
well, yes and no. Yes and no. I think with the current level of sanctions and the political pressure that will sooner or later be felt in Russia due to unsuccessful development at the war scene, I think Russia will somehow shake and perhaps be close to collapse or will collapse. It doesn't mean that, Dutch or Ukrainian tanks have to go to Moscow to do that. No, it's not going to happen, and it should not happen. But when the stability of the regime is shaken, I think at least some parts of Russia will want to separate again, like North Caucasus and Tatarstan, perhaps, and Bashkirstan and some other places, especially Muslim parts of Russia, but perhaps not only them. Then it will be the moment of truth for the West to support this, not like with Chechnya, say that, oh, this is internal policy of Russia, we recognize the territorial integrity of the country, just do whatever you want with that. No, I think it was a deeply wrong move at that time, and it will be very wrong to do it again under the current circumstances. But yeah, it's a bit of futuristic projections. It's too early to speak about that.
Sometimes we need them a bit. That's all.
We do,
yeah. I learned about the conferences in Kiev and with the Kola University and in Juku about Ukraine 2030. And so when I find it immensely brave, but also immensely important to create opportunity to reflect on after the war, because there will be an
True. And I think there is a growing consensus in Ukrainian society, and probably also in the Baltic countries, in Poland, that after a war of such magnitude, it would be a very grave mistake to simply finish the war, even in complete liberation of all Ukrainian territory, and then pretend as if nothing happened. So just shake hands and forget about it. No, it has went way too far, and it's not a question even of like when vengeance or anything. It's a question of whether the same thing will not happen again in 30 years or 40 years. We certainly don't want to pass this inheritance to our children and our grandchildren. And this will happen because the history testifies unanimously that every 30, 50 years, a threat comes from Russia to all its neighbors. It's just the fact of the last several centuries.
Yeah. So let's finish this off. And I have one question. Getting back to you personally, in the sense that you said, well, I want to start up again my videos commenting on the war. Can you tell me a bit more about this?
Well, I just feel like I have taken a small vacations from this project because I had some obligations at work, and then my family and myself needed little holidays, a little rest from the city, and we were lucky to get it. Under the circumstances, it was not so easy to organize, but we managed. And now I'm just returning back to normal. I will try to record at least every few days. And usually I'm just going through social media to the channels I trust, pick up like the most interesting or most significant facts or events or some symbolic details from what's happening, just to familiarize the Western audience with the grassroots level situation in Ukraine, in the front lines, in other parts of Ukraine, in Western Ukraine, and all that. So I will just continue what I have been doing for this several months.
And thank you for that, because it's really important. It's like you say, so in the first 3 months, Ukraine was on the front page, on every website, on Dutch broadcasting and so on. And then, well, simply not fading away because there was still a lot of attention. But this day-by-day live blogs, for instance, they disappeared, so to say. And then we have to step up a bit. So
we just have to learn how to deal with it, because I think it's pretty normal. I'm certainly not accusing Western people of losing the focus, because even we in Ukraine, we need to switch off our psyche from, our mind from following this negative news. And these are negative news generally. Well, thanks God, we are kind of winning the war, so to speak. Maybe it's too early to say, but there is good dynamic. So but still, it's like people killed every day, cities are destroyed every day. So it's negative. So I'm not blaming anyone for wanting to step to watching another channel, another news channel with more pleasant and life-affirming information. But just we have to understand that by hiding our head into the sand, we're not helping. We have to also face the reality, and I'm doing what I can at my micro level to help that. And thank you for running this channel. I have been also following it for some time, receiving your updates on Facebook. So you are doing this very important thing for our common cause.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And we keep on doing that. So Taras, thank you very much for this conversation. It was very good to see you again and to talk with you, not only to listen to you, but also to have our conversation.
Yes.
And
yes.
Definitely we will see each other
and
again.
It's absolutely mutual.
Thank you very much. So, see you next time.
See you.
So basically this is over. I will cut this last few words. So, but thank you again for being here to us. And what we're going to do is it's a little editing, so not very much, but a good ending and a good finish of this little conversation, and then we'll post it again on the YouTube channel.
Great. How is France?
Well, he's more like in the same situation as I. So he's but we're doing different things. So he's suffering from the war.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. He's in a way, he's more vulnerable, more sensitive person, emotionally sensitive.
Yes. and he's talking with a lot of people. He knows a lot of people also in Kiev, and some friends of him are also at the front. And so I think he's doing a bit better than a month ago, but I just saw him today, and we have a regular talk about Ukraine, and Franz also, but also bright ideas and thinking about
Yes.
and trying to assess the situation. Actually, you should talk to him. I think you like that
Yeah,
very
I would
much.
love to. I would love to. I didn't want to bother him somehow, and I didn't have it on my mind too because there was so much going on. But I would love to reconnect someday.
That's a good idea. So, and well, I tried to find out my thing. So in the beginning of the podcast, I had well, it was just starting the 24th of February, and I contacted my Ukrainian friends in the Netherlands. We should organize something, and I saw activities going on. I said, let's try to coordinate, organize it a bit, but that was basically hopeless. So because it was too big. So
Yeah. Of course, everyone was shocked.
yeah, and this large humanitarian organization took over and so on. And then I thought, well, I have to think about what I can do, like you did. And so what can I do? What's really part of my life? And then I started Don't Give Up Ukraine, and little moments of reflection in times of war. That's basically what it is. And then Orisa joined in, and she stayed with us for 3 months.
I know. Yes, I spoke.
This was tremendous. It was, of course, like you said in our video. You said, yeah, well, it was basically. Oh, well, I have to stop this live stream because this is